Welcome back, everybody. This is the Fantasy Facts Podcast brought to you by Fantasy Data. Make sure you give our show a follow. We're at the Fantasy Facts on Twitter. This week, Seth and I are discussing draft strategies to help you dominate your draft this year.
These are the Fantasy Facts with your hosts, Pat Loftus and Seth Keller.
All right. This week, it's good to be back. I am struggling tonight. We had our 20-man Ryder Cup style golf weekend Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of this past week, and I am hurting. Oh, my goodness.
I am hungover. A little Ron Burgundy action over there.
Yeah. Oof.
Well, how'd you do? Did you?
So personally, I went 3-1 over the weekend, but the team that I was on lost. It was, yeah. I mean, I won 3 of my matches. I lost 1. The team that I was on lost. I was part of Team USA. We lost to Team Europe this year, but this is year 12 of this trip, and one guy who has been there almost the same amount, about 10 years, almost the same amount of time I've been there. Got the first hole-in-one of the entire tournament of the entire 12 years we've been doing it. So we had a big celebration for our friend Phil, the newly minted nickname Ace.
Oh, shout out to Phil. Go get him, Ace.
Yeah. So it was a good weekend. How about yours?
My wife was away and I had the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And we built a stand for a rain barrel, and I fixed the soap dispenser in the bathroom because apparently kids think they can do pull-ups on the little tiny soap dispenser thing. Nowhere near as fun. I also did a Settlers of Catan night because I'm a nerd and it's a kick-ass game. Yeah.
Right. All right.
Yeah. Great time though. So much fun. But
that's fantastic.
We have a great show though.
Yes, we do.
That's
we do. So let's.
Right
me as well. Let's take care of some business first, though. Make sure you are using the promo code FAQS FAQS at underdog.com. You will get a 100% deposit match up to $100 for your initial deposit. That's FAQS FAQS at Underdog. And you can use the code FAQS FAQS at fantasydata.com. You can receive 20% off your subscription purchase. That's code FAQS FAQS at fantasydata.com. Get 20% off your subscription purchase. Make sure you're giving us a follow. We're at the Fantasy Facts on Twitter. I'm at Dynasty_Pat. Seth is at FF, the at-home dad. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, really anywhere you consume your fantasy football content.
Oh, yeah. And come join the show right now. If you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, jump in. Send us a comment. We love that. We had some great interactions last week. Love that stuff. Jump in, hit us up. Yep. We're more than happy. That's why we do this stuff, is because we love talking fantasy football and just football in general. So hit us up and jump in there because it's a great time.
Let's go to the news desk first. We're going to flip things up a little bit. We're going to do the news first, then the question, because the question leads into the show. Yeah.
Fresh from the Fantasy Facts news desk.
So I guess we'll start with the bad news. We have 3 little bits of bad news and then a free agent signing to talk about. First, Chris Carson, running back, Seattle Seahawks, has retired due to neck injuries, repeated neck injuries.
Yeah.
It sucks. It really sucks when you see the guy, at least from what I understand, Seattle did him right because they released him because of a failed physical, which allows him to collect a couple $1 million in insurance and bonus and whatever. So Seattle did him right the way that they did it. But yeah, Chris Carson has officially retired from the NFL. Sad to see him go because he was one of those 7th round stories that just worked his ass off up to the starting running back and had a pretty productive NFL career before injuries took it from him.
Yeah, and he was always one of those guys that you were kind of like, I just like the guy. Like it was always that spot where you didn't want to pass on him because you're like, I really like Chris Carson.
He's
like
1,000-yard back.
He's also, like you said, he's a great story of like he was brought in and Pete Carroll was like, oh, well, this guy's better than the person that we drafted. Like the person with better draft capital or the person with a better contract. Like we're going to get him in because he's the better rusher. And that's just one of those things where it's like, man, you want that guy. You want to cheer for that guy. But then you were always like, man, he's just always so far down on draft boards that it was like, do I really want him? Do I not? It became that back and forth. And I appreciate that back and forth. I appreciate the mental gymnastics of drafting a player like that. So shout out to Chris Carson. Sure, he's listening.
Of course.
Hopefully he's taking care of himself. And, it's sad to see him leave. Sad to see him leave football, but hopefully it's moving in the right direction for him where he's taking care of his body. So
it's positive to see Seattle treat him right as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
All right. So we're going to move down to Kansas City. Justin Ross, wide receiver out of Clemson, is done for the season. He had a foot surgery to correct the previous foot surgery he had back in November while at Clemson. And Seth, when you told me this, I immediately went to like the back and the neck injuries, everything that he had done that thought would keep him out of the NFL. You said Justin Ross was done. I immediately thought, oh no, like his career is now over, but it's a foot surgery. So fingers crossed it's not too bad. The job, the cleanup job wasn't too bad. Yeah.
And this is one of those situations where you really feel for the guy because anytime a rookie wide receiver misses time, especially in the beginning of their career, it's really hard for them to catch their stride and be able to overcome that hump. It obviously there's going to be exceptions to that, but that is the typical kind of flow for rookie wide receivers. And to see Justin Ross now miss an entire year really is going to hurt his chances just in terms of looking historically at people that have missed significant time their rookie year. So, he does have going for him. He's on the Chiefs. He's playing with Pat Mahomes still. Like there's still some things going for him. I'm not going out and trying to pick him up anywhere. I would wait a while because probably in the middle of the season you can make a move for him, but just on like a, on a humane level, you feel bad for the kid because he's going through another surgery, getting another cleanup, and it's a year removed from him doing what, I hope he loves doing as his job, playing football. So feel for the kid.
Another rookie wide receiver done for the season, John Metchi, down in Houston. He announced this past Sunday he has been diagnosed with a form of leukemia and will likely not play this season. Seth and I were discussing this pre-show. We're not doctors. I don't know anything about leukemia. All I read was it was the most curable form. So fingers crossed that that's the case and he's able to beat leukemia and suit up next season and show everyone what he can do on the field.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, all leukemia sounds bad to me. So
not doctors. Doctors.
Yeah, no,
it's all bad.
All bad. And like you said, you feel for him. You want him to come back. You want him to come back strong. Again, though, it just historically, it's again that hurdle now. It's an added hurdle for him to jump in order to make a significant impact, at least in terms of fantasy. I will say I've seen a lot of people go off the rails with Nico Collins now. Nico Collins was one of my guys anyways. I don't think this actually impacts him that much. Like I don't want people to get way too overly hyped about Nico Collins. Nico Collins was the second wide receiver there anyways. And big body wide receiver. He's coming into his own. He has a year with David Mills. I don't want to over pursue him, but now it's like I really hope the late July going into August hype doesn't get out of control for Nico Collins, because I want to still be able to draft him late.
Yeah, I mean, Nico Collins was a guy we talked about on our show last week. We talked about potential league winners, and specifically, Nico Collins, I believe, had an ADP of 180. He was coming off the board as wide receiver 77, according to fantasydata.com ADP. So that'll be an interesting one for us to track, because we did talk about him last week. So that'll going to be one to watch that ADP kind of skyrocket.
Yeah, and I took Nico Collins in the 19th round of the Warrior Bowl. So shout out to the Warrior Bowl. Great time. If you didn't get into Scott Fish Bowl, maybe you got into Warrior Bowl. Maybe you'll get into both next year or one next year. Great time. Really good group of people in the Warrior Bowl. And yeah, Nico Collins in the 19th round. I'm excited for it. So
just to proof that we are, kind of practicing what we preach, I took Nico Collins at 1701 in Scott Fish Bowl. So
nice.
We do actually draft these players that we're talking about.
We actually do like them. Like
we do. And finally, bit of good news: Julio Jones signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I believe we talked about Julio last week as well as part of the FAC attack, or 2 weeks ago. I remember we talked about Julio in one of them. Anyway, Julio Jones signs with the Buccaneers. I don't hate it. It's kind of a stopgap until Godwin gets fully healthy. I saw an interesting tweet. Somebody tweeted about moving Julio Jones to tight end. And the first comment that I saw was that's a great idea, and it made me chuckle.
All right, that's a good pun. That's a good pun. I'll allow it.
Yeah.
I really don't know how I feel about Julio in Tampa, though. It's so sad because he's had such a great career. I feel like he's beyond the hump of it, though, and
he's a guy that if you had him on your, like, if you were rostering him in a dynasty league and you got to the point where you're not going to get the value in return, you're like, all right, he's going to retire on my fantasy team. You're happy now because he now has some fantasy value, right? If he went to somewhere like Detroit or somewhere where he has no fantasy value, then whatever. But he goes to Tampa Bay. They need wide receiver help. He's with one of the best quarterbacks of all time. If you held on to Julio Jones, good for you. You might be able to flip him now, or you might be just trying to ride him into the sunset for a fantasy football championship. Yeah.
And in redraft is where I'm most interested to see what happens with him now, because I feel like he was like super late and off of most people's radar. And I wouldn't be surprised if with Brady, especially in the beginning of the season, he puts up a handful of good games that make people go like bonkers for him. So that's where like I'd be looking forward to that if he's on my dynasty team or on my redraft team. If I'm drafting Julio, I'm drafting with the intent to flip within the first month.
It's more so dynasty that you'll probably be able to flip him. So yeah, Julio Jones lands in Tampa Bay. Good landing spot. Excited to see what he can do down there.
Yep.
All right. To the opening question.
Shall we?
Do you have one handy? Oh, look at you.
I'm so prepared. He's got one handy. It's time to pop one open with the opening question.
This week, the opening question comes from Ash is a Tree. Who are you drafting in the first round? Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, CMC, or Jamar Chase?
This is a question of where you are in your draft order. Because go ahead.
No, I was thinking the same thing, because if you're picking a top 2 or 3 pick, you're not taking Cooper Kupp and you're not taking Jamar Chase.
You're taking CMC. No,
Or
sorry, you're taking Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is my one.
Yes, well, if you're drafting 101, it's
CMC.
Jonathan. Yes, you can make a case that all four of these guys are first round picks
Mhm.
in a 12-team draft. However, depending on your draft strategy, spoiler alert, depending on the strategy that you want to take, depending on your league mates, depending on your league settings, you might want to make a course correction, or you might want to go a little differently. But in my opinion, if you're drafting in the first third, 101, 102, 103, you're taking JT and you're taking CMC. If you're drafting in the back half, and depending on your strategy, then you go Jamar back bottom three, not 10, 11, 12.
Well, no, I'd say Cooper's going to go in the
Mid.
top 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like from what I've seen so far, Cooper's going in the top 6.
Mm-hmm.
People are expecting him to repeat his Triple Crown performance of last year. And
that's fine.
There's not much to say that he won't, except for the fact that it's really hard to have that same outcome.
Seth, I can wish in one hand and I can poop in the other, and I can tell you which one's going to fill up first.
I love that expression.
I do. I really do too.
Yeah. I mean, I just.
But no, like Ash, to answer your question, it depends, right? Yeah. Are all four of these guys first round picks? Of course they are. It just all depends on where you're drafting and what strategy you want to employ.
Yeah. And I think it's JT pretty easily as the number one out of this group.
Yes. If you're drafting 101 and you take anyone other than JT, you probably live in Carolina or you went to Stanford with Christian McCaffrey. That's about it.
And I would say for number 2, it's a toss-up between either Cup or CMC, depending on how I want to go. And then I think Jamar Chase is like he's the odd man out of this group, but he's still, like you said, he's still in that top group of guys where there's an outside chance he falls to the second round, but that would be like amazing luck for you if you're able to pick him up in the second.
Right.
I put those 3 above Jamar.
Agreed. All right. Thanks, Ash, for the question. We appreciate it. As we alluded to in the intro and just now with the opening question, we are going to talk about strategies to dominate your fantasy draft this year. Seth, is this the part where you want to do your screen share, or do you want to break down the different strategies? We're going to let's talk about some of the strategies that we're going to go over here first.
Right. And let's set 2 things up first, right? Is there's strategies and then there's tactics, and it depends on what's going on. And I think that's the part that people need to accept first, right? And I love a good analogy, and I love a good metaphor. To me, this is like people that are saying, I'm going to go 0 running back. I'm going to go 0 wide receiver. I'm going to go hero wide receiver. I'm going to go hero running back. I'm going to go modified 0 running back. Whatever that is, whenever they say that going into the draft, I just go, okay. Because to me, that's the same of sitting at the poker table, putting your blind in and going, I'm hitting a flush this hand before anything else happens. You don't do that. And if it does happen, kudos to you. You got lucky as hell that those coincidences of you saying that and those cards hitting, kudos to you for being lucky enough for that to happen. But you don't go into a poker game, into a poker hand, saying what you're going to get. You get your little pocket cards. Maybe you got a little pocket aces action going on. That changes what you're going after on the next set of cards, on the flop, on the turn, on the river. Like it changes as each of those things happen. And you need to be malleable to that in your draft as it's happening.
And there are some general things that you need to be aware of going into your draft.
Right.
And I think the most important thing is to know the settings, your league settings, your roster settings, your scoring settings. Knowing all of those things are going to help you kind of pick a strategy, or at least outline the strategy that you want to take going into the draft.
Yeah.
But I think the next most important thing is also knowing when to be flexible.
Yeah.
Right. And like you alluded to with the poker analogy, right? I'm doing a 0 RB, for the sake of this argument. I'm in a 12-team league. It's a snake draft. I'm picking 101. I've known for a while I'm picking 101. I'm going to go in. I'm going to do a 0 RB draft. So now I'm pigeonholing myself into taking who I think is the best wide receiver at the 101 and not even looking at other thing, not even looking at the running back position, right?
Yeah.
So know your league, know your settings, be flexible. And lastly, if this is a home league, and I think you and I are both in home leagues that have been going on for 10 plus years now.
Yeah.
If you're in one of those, you have valuable information about your league mates. You've drafted with them in person for years. You've drafted with them in your various league hostings for years. You know their mannerisms, their homerisms.
Yeah.
Use that to your advantage, right? So those are some things going into your draft. If you're going to pick a strategy, have that in the back of your mind of things that you should be aware of as well.
Yeah. And I think from here, I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about tactics, right? And so there's a bit of a difference between a strategy, which is your overarching, like, this is what you want to achieve. And then like your strategies, which are like here's some extra, here's what I'm going to do in the moment. I think some of the tactics that we're looking at are really, and I heard somebody else say this, so I'm not taking credit for it. I think it's a great name. It's the great or late strategy. I think it may have been the CBS guys that I was listening to. Don't remember, but whoever said it first, kudos to you. That's the main tactic that I would employ for quarterbacks and tight ends. Yep. So your overarching strategies, though, are going to deal with running backs and wide receivers. They're the players that you're going to draft the most of. They're the players that are going to make up the heart, the core, the engine of your fantasy teams. And so real quick on tactics, I am a huge proponent of great or late with quarterbacks and tight ends. If I get the opportunity to get one of the greats at a relative value, I'm all for it. Otherwise, I will keep kicking the can down the road, and I'll pick up a tight end at some point. I sent out a tweet earlier today. Again, shout out to the Warrior Bowl. I took Hayden Hurst in the 18th round as my first tight end. And it's a tight end. It's a tiered PPR where tight ends get 1.5, wide receivers get 1, running backs get 0.75. So there's a bit of a bonus to having a tight end, but I'm not going to go out of my way to get some of these tight ends that are just very mediocre. And the gap between them is not very significant. And what you see is quarterbacks and tight ends follow a similar pattern where the really, really good, they're great. And then everybody else just kind of slowly fall off. And then there's a handful of people that'll pop later on.
Yeah. Seth and I tried real hard to come up with a different name than late or great. And we started with the word punt, and we couldn't find a good word that rhymed with punt.
I had a lot of words that rhymed with punt,
but none of them were real appropriate.
No, you're right. That's what kept throwing us off, and didn't really make the right.
No, it did
the right analogy that we were working for.
You can use your imagination as to the words we were coming up with, right? So no, I tend to agree. Right, later great for quarterbacks and tight ends is a strategy or a tactic that especially if you hit on the late tight ends and quarterbacks, your team is going to be in very good shape because the bulk of your picks have been high end, high quality running backs and wide receivers, the players that make up the bulk of your team, right? And if you can hit on those late round guys, and that's where doing your homework comes in handy. That's going to be one of the overarching, like, I'm going to be saying that a lot, right? If you do your homework, then, you will hit on one or both of those positions in the later rounds.
Yeah. And so just to give some context, or not really context, but to give you some options, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the late quarterbacks that I really like is Jameis Winston. He has a lot of weapons. We talked about him before.
Yep.
He has a lot of weapons down in New Orleans. He has a 5,030 touchdown season under his belt already, and he's going very late. Mm-hmm. That is a great option. If you are doing a one quarterback league, you can load up on those higher round running backs and wide receivers.
Yep.
And wait. Now, is he going to be is he going to hold the same value as a Pat Mahomes, a Lamar Jackson, a Justin Herbert? No, we're not. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is you can get a quarterback that is beyond the 10th round in one quarterback ADP, and he can be a top 12 quarterback, or at least put up top 12 weeks for you. And that's what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and depending how far down, the rabbit hole you want to go with quarterback, you can grab guys, Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins. I mean, all these guys are coming off the board, quarterback, with an ADP of 145, 150.
Yeah, Mac Jones is 152.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's Mac Jones. Yeah. I mean, hell, I'm looking for Jameis Winston at 143.
Mm-hmm.
Davis Mills 202. I mean, there are options.
That's the turn of the 11th, 12th round for Jameis Winston.
Yep.
That's phenomenal.
Yep, exactly.
And even a guy like Matt Ryan, who's at 130 in fantasy data ADP. Yep. Again, that right there is.
Yep. And the same goes with the tight end position, right? If you're gonna go late or punt the tight end position, you're looking at guys that, ADP in the 140s, 150s, Cole Kmet, 145.
Yep.
Irv Smith, 148.
Hunter Henry even.
Hunter
Henry at 133.
Yeah. I mean, these are all late round tight ends that you can target that have top, tight end one, not the tight end one, but top 12 tight end potential just because of how scarce that position is.
And how flat that position gets too. Yeah. So like you have your Kelseys, which if you can grab a Kelsey where it makes sense, I'm all for it. Grab a Kelsey where it makes sense, which, like for me, that's usually second round. I don't want to take them in the first round. I'll talk more about what I like to do, but I would like a Kelsey in the second round.
Be flexible. Don't be afraid to be flexible.
Yeah.
Probably the second thing I'm going to say the most this show, be flexible. And you're right. You can go in and tell yourself that I'm going to do this late or great strategy, and I'm going to focus on quarterback and tight end after round 10. Then all of a sudden you're drafting at 208 and Kelsey's staring you in the face. Well, shit, Kelsey can be the tight end one. Do I really want to pass on that at 2-0, like late in the second round? Hypothetically, no. Then you have to be able to pivot and change your strategy a little bit.
And the separation between the tight end,
it's obscene.
And like the tight end 6 is always astronomical.
It's like 10 points a game or something silly.
I'm
clearly guessing there, but it's something silly.
It's not as much as 10 points a game, but it is always an astronomical drop off from your top group of tight ends down. And you get a lot of that with the quarterbacks also, where you get the top little tier and then it just kind of falls off and it just flattens out. It's a very nice little exponential curve, taking everybody to math class. There you go.
So looking at fantasydata.com, fantasy football stats and season leaders from 2021, Mark Andrews was the leader with 17.7 PPR points per game. He was the tight end 1 for points per game. Tight end 6 was a tie between TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller, and they both averaged 12.1 points per game. So that's 5 points per game difference between the tight end 1 and the tight end 6. You go all the way down to Taysom Hill, Taysom Hill was the tight end 12 in points per game last year with 10.1. Actually, I'm not going to include him. Forget that. We're going to skip down to Noah. There's not much separation, but Noah Fant, an actual tight end with actual tight end numbers, scored 9.9 points per game. So that's 8 points per game difference between the tight end 1 and the tight end 12.
Right.
That's a lot.
And also think about what you just said. Also, the tight end, what was it? This tight end 6 to the tight end 12 was only 3 points.
Not even 2.2.
8 points.
Yeah.
3 points. Like that. Yeah. That's where this great late strategy comes in.
Yes.
Be warned though that if you wait and it's late, you may be fishing around a little bit trying to find somebody that works. But you're hoping that the rest of your team
makes up
able to make up exactly. It makes up that difference because you were able to get the better wide receiver option, the better running back option.
Yeah.
All right. So enough with quarterback, tight end tactics. Now we're getting into the heart of the show.
Yeah.
And this is where I view almost everything on a spectrum, right? And draft strategies for fantasy football basically fall on a spectrum.
I want to stop you right there. We have a comment from the YouTubes.
Okay.
From the Boston Strangler, Mahomes lost Hill, and Jackson has Dobbins back. So both may regress. I assume we're talking Andrews and Kelsey here. Mm-hmm. So you are correct. There is a chance for regression. I would argue that Andrews has a better chance to regress, whereas Kelsey probably has less chance to regress because, yes, they lost Tyreek Hill. Kelsey is still the number 1 option. Yeah.
Volume.
Yeah.
It's Kelsey.
Yes.
Kelsey should get plenty of volume. The question with Kelsey, I think, goes more to, can he maintain what he's been doing as he continues to get older and as he approaches that statistical age cliff?
Yeah.
And we will always find outliers to that. And so far, Kelsey has been a statistical outlier because he's been so good. So can he maintain and can he continue on that? I think he can, even though, you're betting against small numbers, but you're also betting on the person that has been a small number the entire time, right? And completely agree. Just put another one in there.
Yep.
Hill would pull 2 downfield. Completely agree.
Yes.
There's still speed on this Chiefs team to be able to pull people downfield. Is it going to be as dynamic as Hill?
No.
Definitely not. Not saying that at all. Mecole Hardman, even though people have been saying for the past however many years that he's the next Tyreek Hill,
he's not.
He's not, right? But they still have speed that can pull people, right? And I agree. Defense is going to move. But when you are the best at what you do, and I think Kelsey is the best at what he does, you have the toolbox to still be able to beat defenses when they put more than one guy on you, when they try and target you. And that's what separates the greats from I took advantage of my situation. And as much as I love Schultz, I think Schultz may possibly fit into that I took advantage of my situation category than like Kelsey, who is a great and is going to take advantage of any situation that he's put in. Kind of like if you remember from last year where they put 3 dudes on Devontae Adams and he still scored the touchdown. Like when you're that much of an expert at what you do, there's certain times where you are going to be unstoppable. And I think that is a key difference with Schultz. Sorry, not Schultz. I know. You put the comment up too soon, Pat. I'm reading the comment. I think that's the key difference with Kelsey, and I think he'll be able to continue that.
Yeah. All these are Schultz on a contract year. If you're right, Dawson Knox is the touchdown machine. I think Brevin Jordan is an excellent tight end sleeper as well, especially when you consider his ADP, which is
Brevin Jordan is deep.
I'm still scrolling.
Yeah, it is deep down the board.
Yeah. So I mean, again, if you're going to employ that later grade strategy, yep, I'm going to agree here. Tight end early run separation value has dropped as well. I agree.
I think you have about, and this is me. I think you have about 6 guys that are really, really good tight ends, and I think Schultz is one of them. I am. This is my hottest take of the year. Maybe I don't know. Is Schultz has the greatest potential to be tight end 1 if there's any faltering from those top guys. I think it's Kelsey 1, Andrews 2. But if anybody's going to come out of, that middle grouping of tight ends, I think it's Schultz. And so I think there is a little bit of flatness at the top, which we have not seen in recent years. In recent years, it's been, here's your 3 tight ends. If you don't get them, pass all the way down to round 12, 13, 14, 15.
Right.
I think in this year, you got about 5. You got at least 5, maybe 6 if you throw Schultz in the mix that can be tight end 1. You have Kelsey, you have Pitts, you have Andrews, you have Waller. You have a whole lot that can be in there.
And Ertz, if healthy, could be a possible top 2. Yep, we talked about Ertz. We talked about Ertz last week.
Where's the GIF? Did we just become best friends? You want to go do karate in the garage?
Yeah.
Yep. Right there with you, Boston Strangler. Love Ertz. All right. We're gonna put tight ends to bed.
Let's go back to strategies. We were talking about running backs. We do appreciate the comments and the interaction. Thank you. Keep them coming. We'll try to bring in a few more as they come in later in the show, or if they come in later in the show. But Seth, let's talk. Do we want to do? I feel like 0 RB is the more popular strategy. Do we want to start there?
Yeah. And actually, let me throw this out. We started this and then we jumped in the comment, but I think what you're going to see the more you play is that there is a spectrum that basically every draft, every individual team's draft will fall on in the 0 RB to 0 wide receiver spectrum, right? With 1 0 RB and the true diehards of 0 RB basically saying, you don't draft the running back till the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round. That takes some cojones. I'm good with I'll punt tight end to the end of the draft. I'm not punting on running back that far. And then I feel like the other side of that, the 0 wide receiver end, is I'm going to hammer running backs for the first 5 rounds and then find wide receivers because wide receivers have a little bit more potential to pop later on. And so I think there's a spectrum on that where you get kind of in the middle where it's I'm going to go with a balanced approach and take who I see as values, trying to build a balanced team in the mix. And so that's your way that the spectrum kind of goes from one end to the other. So Pat, I'm fine with talking about 0 RB first because I do feel like that's the hot topic. Everybody wants to talk about 0 RB.
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to the opening question, right? The first round picks, depending on your if you have a pick, if you're drafting the top 3 or the top 4, this is not like an ideal strategy. Can you make it work? Yeah, probably. But you're passing on guys like JT, like CMC, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, depending on your prerogative for running backs. But, if you're drafting in the middle or the back half of the first round, the zero RB strategy is a little more palatable because you can go stud wide receiver. You can go stud wide receiver, elite tight end. I mean, you really don't have to look at a running back until probably round 6 or round 7, right?
See, that's where I am not a fan of zero RB. But I have employed it. I used it in the Scott Fishbowl, but that's where I think, like you said before, doing your homework matters, right? Mm-hmm. So in Scott Fishbowl, my first 5 picks were quarterbacks and wide receivers. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are ways that you can employ it that will work out. However, it's not my I don't want to go into a draft saying I'm going to go zero RB because I feel like you are kind of hamstringing yourself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the fall off of running backs is so fast.
Yeah.
That being said, if you do go zero RB, who are you targeting in those first couple rounds, Pat? Who are you looking for?
If I'm going zero RB and I'm looking for a stud wide receiver, I'm looking for that Cooper Kupp, the Justin Jefferson, the Jamar Chase. I'm looking to grab probably one of those 3. Those are my top 3 guys this year. Maybe a Devontae Adams, but a lot depends. But I'm looking for my first round pick, stud wide receiver. So Kupp, Chase, Jefferson, in really no particular order, right? Yeah. So then since I'm drafting, if I get real lucky, and let's say I'm drafting at like 110, so I get the 110 in like the 202, 203, somewhere in there, maybe I get lucky and I get 2 of those 3. Maybe I get lucky and I pair one of those wide receivers with a Travis Kelce or a Mark Andrews, and I get my top options at both positions.
Yeah.
Right. Then I can come back in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Get upside wide receiver 2. Get a T. Higgins, right?
Yeah.
Get a DJ Moore. Get a Brandon Cooks, and then get a quarterback in there as well.
And I'll throw another name in there too, Deontay Johnson, who has an ADP of 40. Now, yes, a lot has changed in Pittsburgh. Number one, their quarterback situation. But if we've said that Ben Roethlisberger hasn't been a quarterback that moves the ball very well, and I think that's especially last year what we've said, then Deontay Johnson shouldn't be penalized for having a quarterback change. Like, he's played with a quarterback. Yet, granted, there is a big difference between Ben Roethlisberger and either Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. But if we're going to poo-poo all over Ben Roethlisberger and his ability to put the ball down the field, then what's the difference between Kenny Pickett and Trubisky, who we don't have faith in being able to put the ball down the field? Like, I don't like either quarterback option, but Deontay Johnson has a ton of volume that he's going to get towards them. And that's one of the things that I want to look for. If I'm going to go zero RB, I want wide receivers that are going to make up for a lot of volume.
Yeah. Volume. You said earlier, volume is key. And another one from the Boston Strangler, we're talking about JT and Deontay Johnson. Will Taylor get as many looks or carries with Matty Ice? And will DJ catch as many passes with Trubisky? Boston Strangler says both to no. And I can see that for JT because Matt Ryan is way better than Carson Wentz. And I feel like the offense will flow more through Matt Ryan than it did Jonathan Taylor. Diontae Johnson is arguably the best pass catcher on that team. I think Trubisky's going to just feed Diontae Johnson the ball just like Roethlisberger did.
Yeah, and will he get 169 targets and 107 receptions again? Maybe not. That's a lot. 169 targets is a lot. Just statistically, that's a lot. But if he's going as the wide receiver, I was just looking at it, wide receiver 20, where is he at? Wide receiver 15. If he's going as the wide receiver 15, he doesn't need 169 targets. If he gets 130, between 120, 130, that's still going to be enough to give him enough volume. Again, in a PPR league.
Yeah, right.
Big caveat there. Also, in a standard league, I pull that statement back a little bit because you're looking more for touchdowns.
You have to look at the efficiency too. Are guys like Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, are they more accurate than Big Ben? Right? Because that matters. Diontae Johnson had 169 targets, only 107 receptions. How many of those were on Big Ben? How many of those misses were on Big Ben, right? So the efficiency there matters too. If you were going to do, what's your ideal 0 RB start then, Seth? I went through mine. What's yours?
Well, I think a lot of it's similar. Obviously if you can get a Kupp, Jefferson, Chase, I'll throw Adams in there if you're late in there because again, I think he's just such an upper echelon type of guy. I think there's a lot that lot that goes into his situation. Yeah. But again, you can pair up, especially if you're in the mid to late in a snake draft in the mid to late part of the draft, you can pair up a Jamar Chase who has an ADP of 8.5 with a Stephon Diggs or CeeDee Lamb. And I think those are
the next names I was looking at.
Right. Those are big volume, big offensive scoring situation type of guys. And to me, that's how I want to start my 0 wide receiver setup is with guys like that are going. I am very confident in saying they're going to get a lot of volume and they're going to get a lot of scoring opportunities. And those offenses around them are going to keep creating scoring opportunities. I'm less excited about Tyreek Hill. Mike Evans, I'm very scorned from having Mike Evans and his 2 catch, 2 yard, 2 touchdown game. And it's seriously, what do we do with that? It's great for fantasy because it completely saved a fantasy day. But really, that's your stat line. I want to believe in him. I'm not a huge fan, but you could potentially start. You could potentially start with something like Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, and Michael Pittman. Right? That's a potential start that you could get if you go with 0 RB. Yeah. And I would be happy with something like that. I'd be very happy with a Michael Pittman. Less happy with a DK Metcalf. I do like Diontae Johnson completely on par with what's that going to be like in Pittsburgh. But there is a ton of options in that middle group of wide receivers that I'd be really happy with and just kind of pinging them. The bigger question is which running backs would you be happy getting and really happy getting probably outside of the top 60 picks ish. That's where it becomes interesting with 0 wide receiver is trying to find those running backs. And for me, I'm looking for guys that can take over or be the number 1 guy. And so Rashad Penny's in there.
Yep.
It's gross, but Miles Sanders has an ADP of 58.
I was Kareem Hunt is in there.
I'm not going to say Tony Pollard. That's a personal bias of mine. Just deal with it. Just deal with it. Everybody else. Not going to say it. But like a Chase Edmonds, Miami's backfield is a mess. But if you're betting on that ambiguous backfield and he comes out on above,
say
Damian,
Damian,
say
Damian
it,
Harris, Damian Harris.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go a couple rounds later, grab yourself from Andre Stevenson. You know, Devin
Darrell Henderson. If there's a slowdown with Cam's recovery, he wasn't efficient, but he looked healthy. Like, and this is like the difference between watching the game and looking at the stats. Like, he looked healthy on the field, even though his numbers didn't really look that great when he did come back from the Achilles injury. So scooping up a guy like Darrell Henderson that could become the guy. And then in a PPR league, targeting guys like Naeem Hines, J.D. McKissick.
McKissick was the guy. We talked a lot about McKissick last week. He's coming off the board, ADP north of 112, RB 47. He's a PPR monster. He's got a clear path to playing time and targets, and it only gets clearer if Antonio Gibson gets hurt.
Yeah. And so one more from the Boston Strangler.
Yeah.
And I like this, right?
Yep.
I'm not doing 0 RB this year.
No, probably me either.
Unless I'm in late in the first round. And I honestly feel like that is the typical look at it, right?
Yep.
Is if you're late, then I'm much more comfortable going with 0 RB because I can't see myself passing on JT.
Yeah.
Like if I had the 101, I'm not passing on him. If for some unknown, ungodly reason JT falls late, there you go.
This is exactly and this is what we talked about, you know, with the opening question and knowing your league, knowing your settings, you know, being flexible, right? If I don't know my draft position if the draft is randomized right before it starts, I have to be flexible. But if I know it's July 26th, right? If I know that my draft that starts in a month, I'm picking 101, then I get to plan around a whole bunch of strategies of picking Jonathan Taylor first and building out my team from there. If I know I'm picking 110, you know, it goes back to this comment here. You can try to get a Chase and a Diggs. You can try to load up on those wide receivers.
Yeah.
So
I'll throw one more analogy out there. To me, I love playing chess, and when you know what your position is, you can start planning that, right? Mm-hmm. But you also have to be able to deviate when the time presents itself. And so, like in chess, you talk about openings, mid games, and end games, and that's what you have to be ready for. If you know what your draft position is, you have an idea of your opening already, right? Mm-hmm. But if your opponent does something that doesn't follow with what your opening is, if you just blindly keep going with your opening, you could be setting yourself up for a terrible mid-game and very quick end game because they're doing something completely different. And so I love analogy. That's another way that I think of it is along the lines of chess of I'm going to go in and I'm going to be like, all right, I'm going to play the King's Gambit. That's actually what I love doing as white. I'm going to play the King's Gambit. If they do something different on their first move, I can't keep going with the King's Gambit. I have to be able to go, okay, well, that's one move, and then I can counter it with another move. If you've ever done jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing. If you ever any type of martial arts like that, you're constantly countering what your opponent is doing to be able to stay a step ahead of them. And that's the strategy that I love about fantasy football. Again, total nerddom. I love doing that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, again, we talked to, know your league, know your scoring, do your homework, be flexible. Right.
And I'm gonna throw this comment back up here one more time just to highlight the have to practice for each position. That's your statement right there, Pat, of do your homework, right? Mm-hmm. People will poo all over mock drafts. But you know what a mock draft does is it gives you the opportunity to play through what it would be like. Is it going to be 100% what people in your league do? No, absolutely not. No one's saying it is. But you get an idea of, ooh, wait, this guy fell to me.
Yeah.
He might not fall in real life, but what would I do in that situation? And it gives you the mental reps to be able to say, okay, if this happens, I'm ready for it. If that happens, I'm ready for it. If this goes completely sideways, I know I can start going, all right, I'm going 0 wide receiver. And I can look at it and go, wow, this is completely sideways. I'm dumping the whole strategy. I'm going wild card, bitches. Yeah, like jumping out the fence. Like I'm ready for it. Like,
yeah.
But you have the mental practice to be able to do those things.
Yeah.
By practicing and by doing the mocks and by having the ways to have those outs.
Right. So you started briefly touching on 0 wide receiver strategies. Do we want to go down that rabbit hole tonight?
I think we jump into it at least a little bit.
Dip our toe in the water.
Yeah, we don't do a very much good dipping, so we're just going to full on cannonball this stuff. I personally don't like 0 wide receiver. I personally don't like extremes of anything because I feel like they're too based in the outliers.
All right, so because the 0 wide receiver strategy just flips, you're just flipping positions, right? It's the same as a 0 RB. So let me propose this hypothetical to you because I'm looking at ADP data here from fantasydata.com. So you have the 101, right? You have the 102. So you're able to get JT or CMC there. And then guys that have an ADP around the end of the second, start of the third, where you'd be drafting again. So here are the 5 running backs. We have JT, we have CMC, then we have Fournette, Zeke Elliott, and David Montgomery.
And I'm going to throw one more in there.
Sure.
Because you may get lucky. Saquon's going with an ADP of 20, which means, and this is where averages are important, averages don't mean that they always go at the 20th pick. It means that there's times where they go later. There's times where they go earlier. There's a range that fits into those. So for me, it's like Saquon, I'm going to throw him in there because there's an opportunity that he could fall there. If I have JT and I can pair him with Barkley, Fournette, Elliott, Montgomery, I really like Montgomery this year, but I might be more inclined to shy away from him a little bit there. But if I could pair JT with one of those other 3 guys,
or all of them,
I'm excited for that opportunity because I think all 3 of them. Saquon, there's a bit of an injury concern, but if you're talking about does he have the potential to be the running back 1? Absolutely.
I forget who tweeted this out, but it was something along the lines of...
We'll say hi to
Tisha.
Hi, how you doing?
Something along the lines of Saquon Barkley being one of a few or the only running backs to have 250 carries and 120 targets.
Yeah.
And that volume is impressive. Now it sucks that he's never had an O-line
and probably never will.
And he probably never will. And he's oft injured. So it's just, if you're telling me I can start a draft with Jonathan Taylor and then coming back at the 2-3 turn can follow that up with a Fournette and Zeke, or with a Zeke and a Montgomery, or a Zeke and Saquon Barkley, I'm intrigued by that.
Yeah,
I really am. But again, you can say all these things like, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a 0 wide receiver draft. All right, 101, cool. JT, 102, cool. CMC. coming back around to me at the end of the second round, and all of a sudden I'm staring at maybe someone slips, or maybe I'm staring at, a Tyreek Hill or Mike Evans or Keenan Allen in there. Well, oh, wait a minute. I kind of like these guys. Maybe I pivot and I get my Mark Andrews because he's there, or I get my wide receiver one that I like because he's there. So again, do your homework, but know when to pivot.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw this out here because I have it ready to go anyways. I'm gonna throw this in, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on it so that you guys can see it more.
Break this down, Seth.
Totally mathy. So I'm going to try and not go too.
This is where we're going to lose everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to make it too mathy, right? But basically what I did is I looked at over the past 5 years, how did different positions do based on where they were drafted on different metrics, right? And so your wide receivers maintain a lot better than your running backs on almost every category, right? Mm-hmm. So this is 300 plus total PPR points. How many 30-point games do they have? Excuse me. And you can see, like, just having a single 30-point game, wide receivers maintain that so much more than your running backs do. Having multiple 30-point games, right? Wide receivers, again, maintaining that so much more than your running backs. That cliff for running backs is so great. And this isn't taking into account, where in the round they were drafted. It's just taken into account based on fantasy data's ADP for that year prior to the season. This person was going in the first round as a running back. And then what did they do, right? Even 20-point games. Having multiple 20-point games, right? Running backs in the first 2 rounds, again, it's not a great percentage, but running backs in the first 2 rounds are giving you 20-point games at a I would say a good enough clip that I'm betting on those running backs, and then I'm betting on wide receivers over the next couple rounds. And to me, that's where the strategies really take a turn, where it's saying who is going to, at ADP, and that's important. Where are you going to draft them? At ADP, who can give you decent scoring on a weekly basis? And I like looking at it as a count like this, sometimes more than just the average points per game.
Yeah.
Because the average points per game, just average in general, mathematically speaking, gets swayed so much because of outlier games. So if I just say, okay, well, how many 20-point games did they have? That one 20-point game is essentially going to be a running back one or a wide receiver 1 week. That 40-point game, that's why I look at the 30s and more also. That's a week winning week, but a 20-point week that's when you did your job. You were a running back 1. You were a wide receiver 1. You did the job that I wanted you to do.
Yeah.
And so, I try and break it down like that, because the average, if you have an Alvin Kamara 5-touchdown, 50-point game, your average suddenly gets so inflated by that one outlier game that it doesn't truly represent where you were throughout most of your games. And so in almost all of the metrics that I'm looking at here, the wide receivers maintain a lot longer than the running backs do. And that's another reason why I'm not a fan of zero RB, because then you're hoping you find the James Connors in the 12th, 13th round of last year. You're hoping you find that guy that takes over late. And the fact of the matter is you're hoping you get them. And it's real easy to say, oh, this guy at the end of the season, he did great. That's why you should draft running backs late, because this guy came in and took over. And as Boston Strangler, love you being part of the show tonight. You can't predict injuries. You're hoping for that. If you're going 0 RB, you're hoping for either an injury or some kind of transfer of authority in that backfield in order for that to be successful for you. Does it happen? Yes, it does. Does it happen with running backs? Absolutely. And injuries are statistically more frequent at the running back position because they're taking more contact. Totally makes sense. But your first and second round running backs are at a much higher percentage of performing well, and they fall off a cliff, just a flat front cliff in the next few rounds. It's bad, and that's why I do it at times. If those are the cards that are dealt to me, I will play 0 RB. But I would much rather do 0 wide receiver, get some stud running backs early, maybe throw a tight end or a running back or a quarterback in early, and then look for those mid-round wide receivers that are going to give me, 20, 30-point games. Those are the guys that I want to try and pick up. I don't need, I'm a big fan of Jacoby Myers. I don't need him if I'm going 0 wide receiver, unless I'm, maybe in a best ball build or something like that. But his 10 points a game, which is honestly a pretty good representation because he's just almost always at 10 points a game. I don't need that. I want the 30-point game. I want the big hitter. I want to play that wide receiver position as I got 3 guys, and I'm hoping one of them, it's their turn to put up a 30-point game.
So who are you looking at for the week winning wide receivers? Man, that's a lot of W's. But where are you looking? Are you looking to guys that are tied to the elite quarterbacks? Are you looking for I don't want to say Gabe Davis because I feel like that's a whole different.
That's a whole Twitter can of worms.
We're not doing that. But, with guys tied to Pat Mahomes, like a Sky Moore, like a Mecole Hardman. We look in Buffalo, a guy like a Jamison Crowder, like
not Crowder. That's one guy on your list that you threw out there. No. Not okay,
so maybe an Alan Lazard, maybe a Christian Kirk. Actually, he's tied to Trevor Lawrence. But you see what I'm getting at here. Who are the guys that you're looking for, you're hoping to, you're banking on to be?
Well, I think that's part of it is if I'm going with a 0 wide receiver type of strategy and I'm not taking a wide receiver for a few rounds, I'm going for guys that are going to be the number ones on their teams. I'm going for a guy like a Rashad Bateman who has an ADP of 92. Even a Juju Smith-Schuster who's been people are all over the place on Juju.
Juju probably should have been the name.
Yeah, he's a probably behind Kelsey in Casey's pecking order, but I think Juju is going to lead that team in targets, and
targets matter.
They matter very much. I'm hoping that Juju can be closer to his first 2 seasons than his third and fourth seasons. When again, this kind of goes back to the argument with Ben Roethlisberger. You can't say, well, Ben Roethlisberger was ass and then be like, oh, well, Juju should have been better. You're saying that this quarterback was ass, so you're giving the quarterback a pass, but then you're not giving the wide receiver a pass. And it's like, why are we doing the dance there? Right. Even a Tyler Lockett, who has been me being a median points per game guy, he is a guy that is going to give you games where he's going to catch, a handful of balls, and he's going to take one of them to the house. He's going to shake one person and be gone.
Yeah,
that's who I want on a 0 wide receiver team, because I'm going to keep plugging them into the lineup and knowing I'm going to get a whole lot of 5-point games out of Tyler Lockett, but he's going to make it up to me with his 30-point game. He's going to get 1, 2, 30-point games where he's going to swing the tide for me. And it's part of the roster construction that goes along with the strategy that I think you need to fold in together, right?
Right.
And that's what you're doing with the strategy is you're constructing your roster. I would say, teams that I feel like are going to be in situations where they can, where they're going to have high scoring opportunities. I really, really like Jameis Winston. I like the Saints offense around them. MT, even Landry. I know another fan of the show, Shane, is not a fan of my Landry take. Chris Olave. Like if I'm going zero wide receiver, I'll throw.
Yes.
I don't want all three of them with Jameis Winston on my team. No. But that's where I'm laid on. I got Jameis, and let me scoop up Chris Olave as well.
Stacks on stacks.
Love it. Those are just some of the wide receivers that I like. And I'll throw one out for you, Pat, just for you. No, I'm not going to do that because I feel like it's too close to the other one. Depending on roster construction, I'll throw it out there. DJ Shark, he's one of those baseline guys like Jacoby Myers. If it's a flex position, I'm okay with that. I don't want him as one of my three where I'm hoping one of my three is going to put up a 30-point game, but I'm interested in what those guys can do.
As a Lions fan, this warms my heart that someone, a complete stranger, thinks that Amon-Ra St. Brown will finish as a top 6 wide receiver this year. That's very bold. I appreciate it. But I don't see that happening, but man, that'd be awesome. That would make me very, very happy. So
Pat's just excited to have a Lion finally be in a conversation.
Right. That's not well. I'm glad you bring that up. Let's get into the fact attack where we're actually going to talk about another. We're going to talk about a former Lion and a current Detroit Lion. Yeah. See what I did there?
We really need to take you off of the fact attack.
Well, someone needs to hop into the show sheet a little bit earlier. And
all right, you're going to talk over the drop.
All right, 5 minutes on the clock. We are going to answer your questions. Are we ready?
Yeah.
First question comes from @HotRoute777. Who would you rather have in a full PPR league, Cam Akers or Breece Hall?
Hot route.
And this person's Twitter Avi is Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson. I saw the name. I had to click on it. So kudos to you, Hot Route 777, for a great name and a great picture.
I'm going Cam Akers, and
better team, better running back. Yeah,
and the greatest ceiling. And again, going back to the poker analogies, right? Like, who has less in their way to be great? It's Cam Akers. If we assume, just in terms of ceiling, that in order for you to achieve your ceiling, you have to be healthy. So we're assuming both Cam Akers and Breece Hall are healthy. What else is in their way? Breece Hall has a whole lot more in his way to be great than Cam Akers does.
They're not that far apart in ADP. Cam Akers, wide receiver, running back 20, Breece Hall, running back 27. Yeah. That's not enough of a gap in value to me to take a flyer on Breece Hall. I like, again, Cam Akers, higher ceiling, better running back on a better team. Yeah. Jets haven't drafted a good running back in over 10 years. Moving on.
Hey, I still believe in Michael Carter. Damn it.
All right.
We're no longer best friends, Boston Strangler.
From @StartSit1, who would you rather roster in a redraft league? Jahan Dotson or Kenny Galladay?
I'm going to go with Kenny Galladay for the simple fact that he should be the number
Yes.
one wide receiver on the Giants. How much weight does that hold? Not a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty
Okay.
easy in terms of redraft.
Yeah.
Give me the person that should have the greatest opportunity with Kenny Galladay. And I think there's a lot of disrespect kind of happening there. And this is your former Lion here. When he was with the Lions and when he was with Stafford, he had some good seasons. Can he be good with Daniel Jones?
Yeah, and that's
I think so.
My reasoning here for picking Kenny Galladay is, and I'm going to wait for you to finish drinking because I don't want you to spit this out. Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Carson Wentz.
Ooh.
There.
I mean,
I said it. Give me Kenny Galladay over Jahan Dotson.
It's an old movie reference, but what is it? There's if you ever look at chicken shit, there's a little white speck on the top of it. And it's an amazing thing that there's this little white speck on the top of chicken shit, but it's still just chicken shit. So Carson Wentz.
I said what I said.
Daniel Jones. It's all just chicken shit. All right, we paused it for that reference. Go ahead.
At the _Wideminator, Darren Waller or TJ Hawkinson in a PPR tight end premium dynasty startup.
Ooh.
Here's the current Detroit Lion.
I think it depends on what my team looks like currently, and that to me would mean that I probably passed on Waller when he first came around, which makes me think that I'm probably going with Hawk. But I think Hawk has the potential for a longer career. Waller's already 20.
He's 28 or 29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he broke out late. Whereas Hawk has kind of been like the guy that everybody he's only in his third season. So
he's the guy everyone's waiting for Hawkinson to break out.
Yeah, and I think he's shown what he can kind of do, and I'm excited for that. I think I'm going with Hawk here because it's a dynasty startup.
Yeah. Hawkinson has the potential for the longer career. I mean, Waller, I think, has a higher ceiling. Hawkinson offers a safer floor and a longer career, which plays well in a tight end premium dynasty startup.
Wait a minute. Did Galladay get put on the IR? Okay, you read the next question. Yeah. Now I need to read it because Boston Strangler's already saying that Galladay's on the IR. Did we miss that?
I don't. I think he was here for a while. He was practicing with a red jersey, but all right. From at Ludes 35,
Ludes
LUEDS 35. This is a 12-team dynasty league, 1 QB tight end premium. So it's 1.5 per receptions for tight ends. Stephon Diggs or Mark Andrews. I'm going to go with Andrews simply because it's tight end premium. He's got the rapport with Lamar Jackson. He's the number one there. I'll take Mark Andrews simply because it's a tight end premium league. And Mark Andrews is almost guaranteed to be a top 2 or 3 tight end every year.
I still lean Diggs here. I think it's I think the wide receiver position is more valuable than the tight end position. And yes, Andrews has the potential to be in that top 3 tight end category. But man, this is probably the closest of the questions of the night.
Yeah.
I lean Diggs because I value the wide receiver position more than the tight end position, even in tight end premium. And that's where your rich get richer and your average just all stay average. So, that's super close. I could see that. I could see that being like, if you ask this question to me 10 times on 10 different days, I'd probably go Diggs like 6-7 times of it, and Andrews like 4-3 times of it. So,
and then we do have some questions from the Boston Strangler. Yes or no, James Conner over under 200 carries this year? and who is the next man up after he gets hurt. I'm going.
I love how it's like already like a it's a statement. Like who's up after he gets hurt?
I'm going to go.
Not if he gets hurt, but when he gets hurt, who's up? Right.
I'm going over 200 carries and Eno Benjamin after Connor gets hurt. Seth, real quick, what's your answer?
I'm going to go over 200 carries, and I'm not going to choose either of those two. I'm going to go with the rookie Kiante Ingram. Fair. I think he has the ability to be an early down type of guy, whereas I see Williams as a third down type of guy. Mm-hmm. And actually I could see James Conner maybe moving into like an Austin Eckler light type of position. And I put that out on Twitter earlier today in another conversation also. Like I could see that being a case too, where James Conner is doing more of the second, third down work because his receiving ability has been underrated for a while. So I could see that possibly being a thing. Like I'm again not betting on it, but I could see that possibly being a thing and actually making James Conner more valuable because he's not just taking, the 1st and 10 2-yard, dive.
All right. Last question. And this is supposed to be 800. So will Julio go for 800 yards and 7 touchdowns with TB? Yeah, but he's not. Okay. No. All right.
He will have a 30-point game. I'll throw that out there. Julio will have a 30-point PPR game.
Fair. All right.
Count it.
I'm going to put that in the show sheet. All right. That does it for the show tonight. Thank you for the questions. Boston Strangler. Thank you, Tisha. Thank you. We appreciate all the interactions. Make sure you give us a follow. We're at the Fantasy Facts. Almost forgot. Make sure you use our code FACTS, FAQS at Underdog. Get you a 100% deposit match up to $100. That's code FACTS, FAQS. Use the code FACTS, FAQS at fantasydata.com and receive 20% off your subscription purchase. Again, code FACTS on fantasydata.com. I'm at Dynasty_Pat. Seth is at FF the At Home Dad. Good night, everybody.
Catch you on the flip side.